All right, good evening. Before I begin, I do a quick survey here. How many of you are, if it was your choice, how many of you would opt to not take the exam in the next 10 minutes? All right. Professor, a question for you. Would you physically force any of us to take the exam?
It's not a prison camp.
It's not a prison camp, all right. Well, see, the point I'm trying to make is that you have the freedom to leave if you want to, and you don't want to take it. But I guarantee that you're all going to stay. Now, this isn't the best example, but the distinction I'm trying to demonstrate to you is the distinction between hard power and soft power. In both cases, you are made to behave in a certain way. And one, through physical applied force, hard power, and the other through, it's done very cleverly, it's called soft power. Cultural imperialism is spread in such a manner, and it is in the way in which our economy is driven. What is cultural imperialism? According to Dr. Wendell Eckert, a professor of U.S. history, cultural imperialism is, and I quote, the forced acculturation of a subject population or the voluntary embracing of a foreign culture by individuals who do so for their own free will. I propose that imperialism through soft power, or banal imperialism, is far more effective at securing our economy against foreign nations than using our military to do it. Why? Because number one, hard power exposes our actions to the international community, which have consequences if they are ill. Number two, soft power subtleness eases its proliferation. And number three, hard power builds resentment against Americans, whereas soft power promotes an embracing of American culture. Number one, hard power through military use is blatant. Its blatancy subjects us to scrutiny on the international stage. For example, our engagement in Iraq has cost us our credibility with torture cases in Abu Ghraib, interrogation procedures in Guantanamo, and the premises of entering Iraq at the outset. The UN has means to scrutinize our war efforts. Number two, banal imperialism is not so detectable, making it extremely easy to spread and virtually impervious. Why? Because it's done primarily to consumerism, the American trade. Consumerism accounts for over 70% of our GDP, according to Dr. Joe Hirschhorn, former senior staff of the U.S. Congress. It literally runs our economy. Hence, if we acculturate others to act like us, we make the entire world like us and drive the economy in the same fashion that we do. Let me explain. I received this issue of National Geographic last May now, and found this one article that attempts to describe education system in China. It's all based on China here, and it has nothing to do with this, but I'll see the connection here. Girl named Bella, 15 years old. She this one article. It's one particular paragraph. I found it very fascinating. It says. It starts off with opening this. She hates America. She hates Japan, as she's been taught in her textbooks. And she goes on to say, and I'll quote: She hated America too because it always meddled in the affairs of other countries. She speaks a fair amount of English. Her favorite restaurant was Pizza Hut, and she liked the spicy ones at KFC. That's power. Let me explain. She hates America, but she's supporting our economy, American businesses. She's volunteering her support for American corporations, yet if you ask her, if you sit down with her and ask her if she would do so on her own free will, she'd probably say no. According to a recent study in Health Affairs by Barry Hopkins, and I quote, the rate of change in overweight and obesity in China has accelerated during the past decade and could easily double over the next 2 decades. Sounds like an American trend to me. Number three, hard power. Hard power builds resentment against Americans, whereas soft power promotes an embracing of American culture. Proponents of hard power may argue that our military might will suffice in the expansion of our economic powers, and that our history has proven so. This is true. As Stephen Kinzer points out, author of Overthrow America's Century of Regime Change from Hawaii to Iraq, he points out that, and I quote, throughout the 20th century and into the 21st, the United States repeatedly used its military power to overthrow governments and refuse to protect American interests. In most cases, it acted mainly for economic reasons, specifically to establish, promote, and defend the right of Americans to do business around the world without interference. But what proponents fail to realize that this game was chess and not checkers. The use of hard power actually undermines American security. Such use of force backfires, as Iraq has demonstrated throughout worldwide protests. The Guinness Book of World Records recorded the largest protest, which was an anti-war protest in 2004. A more serious problem is the uprising of terrorism. According to the New York Times, and I quote, the war in Iraq has made global terrorism worse by funding Islamic radicalism and providing a training ground for the lethal methods that are increasingly being exported to other countries. That's just the Times reporting an assessment, and that assessment was really made by 16 U.S. intelligence agencies, folks, CIA, NIA included. So, I'd rather lose advertising money in the quest to expand our economy. But to lose money on a war effort, lose credibility, and pay the heftiest price of our national treasure, our troops, it's not only ineffective, but it's disgraceful. Consequently, I conclude that the most effective and powerful method of growing our economy and securing it is through the means of banal imperialism. Thank you.
All right, Christian, I think it probably makes a better essay than a speech. You've got a very complex propositional statement, and it needs to be simplified. I thought the secondary claims, though, were a little bit more clearly laid out. As your argument developed, it became clearer where you were going, but like I said, the phraseology on the main proposition makes more sense at the end of the speech, and so you need to either clarify it or simplify it there at the beginning. I did think that you did a pretty good job signposting your points in the main body of the speech. The best thing that you did was you had consistent source citations and examples that illustrated the points that you're talking about. Although I thought you got a little sidetracked with the National Geographic story that you were reading, it did explain the point that you were trying to make. The argument that military is being used for economic purposes, I think that needs to be a little bit more developed. You've got the one piece of evidence that suggests that that the U.S. is engaged in regime change primarily for these particular policies, and I think that that's a little conclusionary. You'd need, I think, particular examples to show. Otherwise, it's a very general statement. I thought the argument at the end, talking about the effectiveness or the ineffectiveness of the involvement in Iraq, was documented pretty well, although you do seem to be asking us to, it's a paraphrase of what intelligence agencies have got there. We'd want to get those specific quotes. But again, does the Iraq experience match the economic issue that you're talking about? Because that's going to be the key example that you use on this particular point. I thought it was delivered pretty well, a little low-key, but like I said, at the end of the speech, the explanations were a lot clearer than they were at the beginning. All right, thank you.